Hello and welcome to China Global Television Network. This is The World Today with me, Mahia Mutwa in Nairobi. We begin with Iran, where internet activity has been reported in the country after an 8-day blackout. Monitoring group NetBlocks says connection is only around 2% of ordinary levels, with no signs of a significant return. Mobile phone users say text messaging services have also resumed. The blackout began on January the 8th amid nationwide protests, with most government websites functional but foreign networks restricted. Ehsan Kevani has more now from Tehran.
After protests intensified in dozens of cities, the Iranian government moved on January 8th to suspend international internet access and block international phone calls. Although the demonstrations have since subsided and daily life has largely returned to normal, the internet blackout remains in effect, continuing to disrupt online businesses and digital livelihoods.
We have clients who specialize in attracting international patients to Iran's health sector. They handle all aspects of their medical travel, from consultation and scheduling to logistics and coordination. However, due to the ongoing internet blackout, these operations have been halted entirely.
Over the past decade, high employment has been a persistent challenge for Iran's economy. In response, many young Iranians have turned to social media and digital platforms to build online businesses and generate income. The ongoing internet restrictions, however, are already costing this growing digital sector millions of dollars each day.
According to government statistics, the daily revenue for Iran's internet-based businesses reached $36 million in 2022. That figure has now grown to more than $80 million per day, demonstrating the rapid expansion of the digital economy.
In Iran, policies governing communications and cyberspace are shaped through a coordinated process involving multiple government bodies, including the Supreme Cyberspace Council, which brings together representatives from across the state.
Ehsan Kevani, CGTN, Tehran.
Well, anti-government protests in Iran have broadly subsided as the U.S. maintained warnings of grave consequences, and key U.S. allies ramped up regional diplomacy to prevent a military confrontation. U.S. President Donald Trump has told reporters that reports of Tehran halting planned executions played a significant role in his decision to avoid a military strike on Iran.
Did Arab and Israeli officials convince you to not strike Iran?
Nobody convinced me. I convinced myself. You had yesterday scheduled over 800 hangings. They didn't hang anyone. They canceled the hangings. That had a big impact.
Well, despite the de-escalation in rhetoric, officials say U.S. military assets are being moved into the Middle East. Saudi Arabia and Qatar have warned the U.S. of regional destabilization if U.S. forces intervene militarily. Walter Morris has the details.
The U.S. military is on the move amid ongoing tensions between the United States and Iran. A carrier strike group led by the USS Abraham Lincoln is reportedly on its way to the Middle East from the South China Sea, bringing dozens of planes and helicopters like F-35 fighter jets to the Persian Gulf, as U.S. President Donald Trump weighs options for strikes against Iran, following weeks of unrest and violent clashes between security forces and anti-government protesters. One day after the United Nations Security Council held an emergency meeting on Iran, where senior UN officials urged both countries to de-escalate, U.S. allies in the region urging the Trump administration to use restraint. According to the New York Times, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu spoke to Trump earlier this week and asked him to hold off on attacking Iran, while leaders of several Arab nations continued their diplomatic efforts with U.S. and Iranian officials. Netanyahu also speaking with Russian President Vladimir Putin. The Kremlin says the two leaders discussed the state of affairs in the Middle East during a phone call Friday, with Russia offering to continue mediation efforts with Iran. The Trump administration has warned of military strikes on Iran over Tehran's response to civil unrest. Protests began late last month over inflation and economic challenges, but grew into broader, widespread anti-government demonstrations. Last week, the government cut off telephone lines and internet access in the country in response to the opposition. On Friday, Iranian state TV reporting security forces have arrested 3,000 people who they say are members of terrorist groups. And as images of the aftermath slowly trickle in, this week Trump holding several meetings with his national security team, and senior administration officials repeating the warning that all options are on the table. Walter Moore, CGTN, Washington.
U.S. lawmakers have met with Denmark's defense and foreign ministers in Copenhagen to discuss Greenland. A delegation led by Senator Chris Coons, a member of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, arrived in the Danish capital on Friday, aiming to lower tensions over U.S. ambitions to take over the territory. U.S. President Donald Trump has threatened new tariffs on any country opposed to the U.S. takeover. He says Washington is discussing the issue with NATO. Several European countries have sent troops to Greenland in a show of support for the Arctic island and Denmark. Trump says Greenland is crucial to U.S. national security interests, and anything less than a takeover is unacceptable. Meanwhile, a Gallup poll suggests a dramatic decline. Washington's leadership has also fallen significantly in Germany. Poll approval was not as steep in the UK, Italy, and France. The poll was conducted before Trump stepped up his push to take over Greenland. China and Canada have issued a joint statement committing to strengthening exchanges and advancing outcomes at all levels. It comes as Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney says his visit to China marks a, quote, new era of bilateral ties. Our reporter Yu Yang has more.
Friday marks the third day of Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney's visit to China. On Friday afternoon, Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney briefed the media on the outcomes of his visit, where he highlighted the importance of trade relations between Canada and China. Well, he added that the trip had been historically productive and that the two sides would work together to forge a new strategic partnership.
It has been a historic and productive 2 days, and I am very pleased to announce that we have made significant progress in a number of key areas. Stepping back, it's been 8 years since a Canadian Prime Minister visited China. And in that time, the world has changed dramatically. The technological revolution and the energy transition are accelerating at an unprecedented pace. The global trading system is undergoing a fundamental change, and the effectiveness of multilateral institutions on which trading powers such as Canada and China have greatly relied, that effectiveness has been greatly reduced. This is happening fast, it's large, it's a rupture, it's not a transition.
This visit is notable because the first one made by a Canadian Prime Minister in 8 years, and when meeting with the President Xi, Carney reaffirmed Canada's commitment to the One China principle. He said his country is willing to work with China in the same direction, respecting each other and working together to expand the cooperation in areas such as economy, trade, energy and climate change. He said multilateralism serves as the cornerstone of global security and stability. Well, the best way to describe the results of Carney's visit might be his own words. He called it a new era of relations. Yu Yang, CGTN, Beijing.
Well, for more on China-Canada relations, we spoke earlier to Dominic Barton, former Canadian ambassador to China. Barton believes the framework and working groups established between the two countries can play an important role.
I think it's very significant. I think it's sort of the, if you will, the beginning of an establishment of a new era in that long relationship. So, and I think there were some sort of broad framework setting things that were put in place, as well as some specific agreements. So I think this is a big deal. I think it's at two levels. I think the first is that there's this a framework, as I said, an approach of how to be able to work through things, the opportunities in trade and investment, the people-to-people ties that President Xi spoke about, and that Prime Minister Carney also believes in, education, culture, sports, tourism. And I think that sort of establishes the working groups and the sort of the forums to be able to work through opportunities, but also issues. And I think then specifically, secondly, there's progress made on some of the trade tensions that are there. And I think these are first steps, but it's more than what I expected in a first sort of meeting like this. I thought the first part was key, but so I think this is very significant. There's more to be done on trade. There's issue, the sort of the countervailing tariffs on each side more broadly as what it relates to agriculture on the Chinese side, the EVs, areas of investment, how that's going to work through. I think there will always be challenges and issues that come up in any good relationship. So I think being able to have the frameworks and the working groups in place to be able to deal with that will be very good. But you think about this, it was only 7 or 8 months ago, the Prime Minister Carney met with the Premier of China, at the UN, I think it was, and then, the meetings that happened in Seoul. So I think there's real conviction, it is what it feels like to me on both sides to, set up for a new era.
And that's it for this edition of The World Today this hour. Do stay tuned. I'll be back shortly with more news from the continent in Africa Live. Yoweri Museveni is expected to be declared the winner of Uganda's presidential election this afternoon. In Guinea, General Mamadi Doumbouya is to be sworn into office following his win in last month's presidential vote. And deadly floods rock southern Africa, with South Africa and Zimbabwe among the worst hit. Hello and welcome to Africa Live, wherever you're tuning in. I'm Mahe Mutua in Nairobi. Wonderful to have you joining us. Here's what else is coming up. In your business news, Tanzania's President Hassan expresses regret over the internet shutdown that was enforced around last year's October elections. And in sports, we'll have the latest from the final weekend of the Africa Cup of Nations and tonight's third-place playoff between Nigeria and Egypt. We begin in Uganda, where all indications point to a comprehensive victory for the incumbent President Yoweri Museveni in Thursday's election. Based on the results from over half the polling stations, electoral officials say the 81-year-old has secured about three-quarters of the ballots. His main challenger, Bobi Wine, has nearly 20%. Election day was marred by delays due to technical problems that left many voters stranded at polling stations. According to local police, at least 7 people were killed in violence in central regions that night. The official result is expected to be announced this afternoon.
This is the candidate's performance as of this hour. Kyagulanyi Sentamu Robert, 1,414,619, constituting 20.71% of the total votes cast. The total number of polling stations where the Ugandans went to cast their votes yesterday are 50,739. The total number of polling stations whose results we have received so far here at the National Tally Center are 30,138, constituting 59.4% of the total number of polling stations.
Meanwhile, Robert Kyagulanyi, or Bobi Wine's party, says he has been arrested by the army with his current whereabouts unknown. The National Unity Platform made the announcement on social media on Friday, saying an army helicopter landed in his compound in the capital, Kampala, and forcibly took him away. The Ugandan police has denied those allegations. The 43-year-old is facing allegations of mass fraud during the election, which was held under an internet blackout, a situation condemned by the UN and international human rights groups. Wine had called for protests over the election result. Elsewhere, Guinea's leader, General Mamadi Doumbouya, will be sworn into office today following his win in last month's presidential election. Several African leaders are expected in Conakry for the inauguration ceremony. The 41-year-old got into power through a military coup in 2021, deposing the then President Alpha Condé. Officials say his election win marks a formal switch from military to civilian rule. In southern Africa, authorities are warning of more severe rains in the coming days as the region reels from multiple deaths and injuries, as well as massive infrastructure damage from intense flooding since November. In Zimbabwe, the local disaster management agency says 70 people have been killed and more than 1,000 homes destroyed since the beginning of the year. South Africa has reported at least 19 deaths in 2 of its northern provinces since late last month. The rains have also led to the closure of parts of South Africa's iconic Kruger National Park, and the island nation of Madagascar has also been affected, with authorities there reporting 11 deaths since late November. Meanwhile, Mozambique has also witnessed severe flooding in its central and southern regions. Hundreds of thousands of people are reported to be impacted across a region which has also regularly has had long and destabilizing periods of drought. Meanwhile, CGTN's David Mbithi takes a closer look at the situation in South Africa's badly hit Limpopo province.
The scale of destruction is vivid in South Africa's Limpopo province, where the flood warning has been raised to its highest level in recent days. Drone footage captures swollen rivers that have burst their banks and swept through the countryside. Locals say the flooding has cut off communities, and it's not yet clear when essential services will be restored.
There's no water, there's no electricity, and even the network is gone. We had to switch phones off, and look, what are we going to eat?
The South African Weather Services forecast more rainfall in Limpopo, raising fears that the crisis could worsen. The community here fears being cut off from markets and essential supplies if key roads like this one are closed due to safety concerns.
Look, this road here, it's almost the economic vein of this region. It's the R40, the R71. If they are all closed, we're out of commission, basically.
In other parts of Limpopo province, the deluge has decimated livelihoods and left many stranded. Among those counting their losses is 66-year-old Wilson Mnisi, who lost his home and business to a swollen river.
There is nothing left of what I had built here. It's all destroyed and washed away. Everything I built, gone. Even the wooden dance room I had built.
The cultural dance teacher is facing the grim prospect of survival now that his dance facility is gone and everything else he relied on.
The officials say the rain might subside around Tuesday or Monday. I really do not know if it will be better by then, because I had a vegetable garden here. I had planted even nuts all over here, but it's all buried in the sand now.
Emergency services say they are currently conducting search and rescue operations across Limpopo to assist residents affected by the deluge. Since October, parts of Limpopo and Mpumalanga provinces have received roughly twice their average annual rainfall. Authorities have also warned of displaced wildlife, including crocodiles and hippos, which have been sighted near homes. Devin Bidi, CGTN.
Well, the flooding in Mozambique has forced boat rescues and emergency evacuations. CGTN's Jane Keo with more.
According to the UN agency Relief Web, at least 41 people have been killed in flash floods following heavy rainfall in Mozambique this month. In the southern district of Boane, just east of Maputo, search and rescue operations are ongoing, even as the water levels keep rising.
The big challenge we have is to tell people to leave. Today in particular, we are telling people to leave their homes. We are working with the army forces. Here, we have the commander, our partner. There is zero tolerance for those people who are in the danger zone. They leave voluntarily, or the government with the defense force will take them out by force, because the alert is red.
The country's disaster management agency has noted that most of the deaths were caused by electrocution from lightning strikes, drowning, infrastructure collapse, and cholera. The flood water has cut off major roads, affecting normal operations.
When we arrived in the morning, I can say that I'm here from 7 a.m. today, and the water was quite low. But now the water level is higher. Looking at the water from far, it seems like it has no current. But when you get closer, it's very risky. You can get in the water and not be able to get out. Being rescued will be very difficult. The distance is very far, and the tide is getting higher.
It's a harrowing experience for many.
Very scared. On my way there, it was okay. I went by foot and it was passable. On the way back, it was complicated. Yes, the water is powerful, but thank God we made it. We are alive. Thank God.
Authorities are warning of more heavy rains in the coming days. Jane Keo, CGTN.
Now to Togo, where African leaders are making a push to see a peace deal between Rwanda and the DRC take effect. The two sides came to an agreement in Washington last year after an escalation in fighting in the eastern DRC between the Congolese army and the M23 rebel group, which is believed to be supported by neighboring Rwanda. The talks will center on the terms of the agreement, including troop movements on the ground and the deployment of monitors. The two-day meeting brings together African Union facilitators, including former presidents Uhuru Kenyatta, Olusegun Obasanjo, and Salwok Zewde. The current AU Commission chairperson Mahmoud Ali Yusuf, as well as Rwanda's foreign minister, are also present. Togo's president Faure Gnassingbé recently replaced Angola's João Lourenço as the AU's mediator for the conflict. Now, amid the fighting in the DRC, a hospital run by the International Committee of the Red Cross and Red Crescent is standing out as a beacon of hope. With many health facilities across the eastern region destroyed or looted, it is difficult for many victims of the conflict to get life-saving treatment, and attending medics say they are being kept very busy. CGTN's Enoxikolia has more now from the city of Beni.
The Beni General Hospital in North Kivu province serves as a frontline health facility. The hospital receives and treats patients from across the country, including civilians and wounded fighters. Mumbere Yusuf and Maombi Justin are examples.
I was wounded in the leg. There was no medical care. There were only nurses from small health centers. It wasn't proper care, but since I arrived here, I thank God because I find that the care here is good. I've been here for 2 months now, and I can see that I'm making good progress.
I was in Masisi territory. The M23 rebels shot me. My family took me to hospital in Pinga, but they weren't able to treat me there. So I was transferred to Beni. Now, there's been a change. When I arrived, I couldn't sit like this. But today, I can start to move.
The ICRC initially set up the hospital in 2019 as a stabilization center. However, the intensity of the fighting has led to an influx of patients.
Given the situation we are currently experiencing in Eastern DRC, we are treating between 80 and 90 patients every day. Beni seems to be calmer and has the resources. There are medical facilities elsewhere, of course, but they don't have enough resources. That's why they have to seek help from partners who do have sufficient resources.
Despite numerous attempts at peace deals between the army and the M23 rebel group, none have taken hold.
With war, there are consequences. First of all, there are many casualties, many wounded who are already filling up the hospitals in North Kivu, particularly here in our town of Beni. Unfortunately, most armed groups do not respect international humanitarian law. Often, when there is a ceasefire, you'll see on the ground, as we do, that there are always violations.
According to a joint report by the Congolese government and international organizations, more than 7,000 wounded have been recorded in hospitals in North Kivu and South Kivu provinces. Enoxikolia, CGTN.
Now, Chad says 7 of its soldiers were killed this week in clashes with fighters from Sudan's paramilitary Rapid Support Force. Authorities said a contingent of RSF militants crossed into its territory on Thursday and engaged Chadian troops near the border town of Tine. There has been no confirmation on RSF casualties. It follows a separate incident on December the 26th when a drone strike killed 2 Chadian soldiers at a military camp near the Sudanese frontier. The RSF has been fighting the Sudanese army since April 2023, a conflict which has devastated the country and forced many Sudanese to flee over the border with Chad. Chadian officials condemned the RSF for their actions and warned that it could spark a wider regional crisis. Meanwhile, the new UN High Commissioner for Refugees has visited Chad to assess the situation there. Barhan Salih, who assumed the position on January the 1st, underscored the need for urgent humanitarian assistance and better protection for people fleeing the fighting in Sudan. The 65-year-old met families who had escaped the now-occupied western city of El Fasher that was for months under a brutal RSF siege. Many say they've been displaced several times since the conflict began almost 3 years ago. Salih described a crisis marked by abuse, hunger and trauma, with women and children bearing the heaviest burden. He warned that aid agencies are struggling to meet even the most basic needs.
Since April 2023, nearly 14 million people have been displaced. 2 million have returned back to precarious situations. and the rest are internally displaced, 4.6 million of whom are refugees. They're coming across the border in order to seek a refuge. Chad is offering a refuge and has kept the borders open for these desperate people as they seek safety and protection. A sign of generosity and humanity of this country that should be appreciated. I call upon the world to really act to bring this conflict to an end. This should not be allowed. This should not be allowed to continue.
Now, the ongoing U.S. immigration crackdown continues to generate debate, with legal experts questioning the use of so-called third country deportations. The Trump administration has used some African countries, including Ghana, South Sudan and Eswatini, for this purpose. But as the focus remains on the numbers, affected families are telling a much more personal story. CGTN's David Mbithi tells us more.
It was last November when this footage of a visibly distressed Rabiatu Kuyate went viral. The 58-year-old is seen fighting Ghanaian immigration officers who were forcing her to board a van to start her journey back to her native country of Sierra Leone. She had fled the country nearly 30 years ago and had not visited since. Her son, Mohammed Al-Ghali, who was raised in the U.S. state of Maryland, says he was stunned by the footage.
I had so many negative emotions go through my mind because I hadn't seen my mom at all since July. The next time I had seen her, she was getting dragged, from the hotel through the streets in Ghana. That was the next time I had seen my mom.
Just a week earlier, Kuyate was among more than 30 third country nationals deported by the U.S. to Ghana. In the months prior, she had fought hard to avoid being deported to her home country, where she says she had been raped during the Civil War and where she feared being tortured because of her father's ties to the political opposition. A U.S. immigration judge even granted her protection from being sent back. But U.S. Immigration and Custom Enforcement bypassed the order by deporting her to Ghana instead.
In America, when they were bringing me, they said I'm coming to Ghana. Ghana is supposed to be my safe haven. I cannot go to Freetown because of political reasons.
The incident put Ghana in the middle of a heated debate over Trump's use of third country removals to hasten the departure of unauthorized immigrants who cannot easily be sent to their home countries. Legal representatives of the deportees said Ghana's repatriations appeared systematic and that none of their clients had opportunities to raise legal objections before the flights.
Contrary to what the administration is saying about the nature of these third country deportations, the U.S. is deporting some of the most vulnerable refugees that are in this country to places where they don't have protection, where they will thereafter be sent on to places where they will face persecution and torture, as determined by a U.S. immigration judge, more likely than not.
In a statement, a U.S. Department of Homeland Security spokesperson claimed all those sent to Ghana were what she described as illegal aliens who received due process and had final removal orders. But she did not address questions about the subsequent repatriations, noting that it was now beyond the U.S.'s domain. Meanwhile, Ghana's Foreign Ministry, Interior Ministry and Immigration Service have not responded to questions about the handling of U.S. deportees. David Mbithi, CGTN.
All right, it's time for us to take a short break. Here's what's coming up in the business. Tanzania's president expresses regret over the internet shutdown that was enforced around last year's October elections. And we'll see how a Libyan filmmaker is defying all kinds of hurdles to keep his camera rolling. Time for the business, and we begin in Tanzania, where the nation's president has for the first time expressed regret over a deliberate internet shutdown during the country's October elections. President Samia Suluhu Hassan acknowledged the disruption and uncertainty diplomats and foreign nationals faced. It came amid days of unrest and violence that rights groups say left hundreds dead. CGTN's Ian Kinyua has this report.
President Samia Suluhu Hassan was responding to international concern
months after one of the most controversial elections in the country's history. She addressed diplomats and representatives of international organizations on Thursday in Dodoma after the internet shutdown was ordered for 6 days during the October election period.
To our partners in the diplomatic community and the foreigners residing here in Tanzania, I express my sincere sympathy for the uncertainty, service disruption, and internet shutdowns you experienced. I assure you, we remain vigilant to ensure your safety and prevent any repeat of such experiences.
The shutdown came as protests erupted on election day and continued for several days amid a heavy police crackdown. Rights groups say hundreds of people were killed, making it the worst post-election violence Tanzania has experienced in decades.
We acknowledge the challenges of the unrest and violence on the election day and shortly thereafter. Our response was essential to maintain constitutional order and ensure safety of all citizens and diplomatic community.
Hassan won the October election with more than 97% of the vote after candidates from the two main opposition parties were barred from running. The country's leading opposition figure remains in prison, facing treason charges.
But two pardoned 1,787 convicts associated with the unrest and violence of 29th October last year.
Authorities say those pardoned were mostly young people, whom the president said had acted under peer pressure. She also blamed foreign interference for fueling the unrest. Notably, Tanzania has since established a commission of inquiry into the violence, as foreign observers maintain the election failed to meet democratic standards. Ian Kenywa, CGTN.
Now, Kenya has struck a preliminary trade agreement with China that allows virtually all of its goods duty-free market access. This is according to the Kenyan Trade Ministry, that says the two sides have been holding discussions for a full bilateral trade deal. Key products include coffee, tea, and cut flowers. While the deal provides an immediate boost for key agricultural products, officials say negotiations continue towards a final comprehensive economic partnership agreement targeting 100% access. Meanwhile, China is currently building the world's longest cross-sea high-speed railway bridge to promote development across the Yangtze River Delta. And as CGTN's Chen Yilin reports, the project has reached a major milestone.
This is Hangzhou Bay in eastern China. Here, China is building the world's longest cross-sea high-speed railway bridge. Stretching nearly 30 kilometers, the project reached a major milestone on Friday. Its first main tower was successfully topped out.
This main tower rises 200 meters above the sea. That's the height of an 80-story building. But right below, the water is anything but calm.
The bridge spans one of the world's strongest tidal bays. It's home to the famous Qiantang River tidal bore. Offshore construction is especially challenging.
The tide here can change by almost 9 meters in a single day. But this bridge is designed to meet the standard for a 350 km/h high-speed rail, with each pier having a service life of 100 years. This presents a huge challenge.
Construction teams have built a stable offshore working platform, effectively creating a land base at sea. At the same time, smart engineering technologies are playing a critical role. I joined project manager Jiang Benjun to see how they work.
This system allows us to fully sense real-time conditions. Everyone, from managers to on-site workers, can instantly adjust operations for safety. All systems are independently developed in China.
When complete, the bridge will set 5 world records in cross-sea rail engineering.
As of now, the total investment in the bridge has reached 11.2 billion yuan, with 75% of the work completed. The bridge is expected to be fully connected by September this year. The entire project is set to be operational by the end of 2027.
Once completed, high-speed trains will cross Hangzhou Bay in just around 10 minutes. And the impact goes beyond speed. The bridge will significantly enhance connectivity and support high-quality integrated development across the Yangtze River Delta, one of China's most dynamic economic regions. Chenling, CGTN, Zhejiang Province.
Mali's industrial gold output fell roughly 23% last year, hurt by the lengthy suspension of Barrick Mining's operations due to a dispute over tougher mining rules there. This is according to provisional figures from the West African country's Mines Ministry. One of Africa's largest gold producers, Mali has been pushing reforms intended to capture more value from the sector as enshrined in a mining code introduced in 2023. However, the tougher rules sparked a 2-year standoff with Barrick, leading to the Canadian company's massive Loulo-Gounkoto complex being put under provisional administration. The government reached a deal with the miner late last year. Meanwhile, an audit led to the recovery of $1.2 billion in arrears from mining companies. Global companies are jostling over access to critical minerals in the Democratic Republic of Congo, but many local people say they're concerned about how it will impact both their lives and the long-term future of their regions. In the country's southeast, demand for the silver-tinged cobalt, essential for electric batteries and defense technology, is growing. But that means the region's protected areas and nature reserves are more at risk. CGTN's Beryl Oro has more.
70 kilometers from the mining capital Lubumbashi, Lukutu community leaders have established a forest concession to legalize customary land titles after watching mining firms displace other villages a decade ago in mineral-rich DRC.
We have one area for protection, another for conservation, and other areas for development. The development area is where villagers can farm and carry out small activities that require cutting trees. The conservation area is meant to preserve the forest, and no farming activities are allowed there.
The Lukutu Community Forest Reserve obtained official land titles to help avoid unauthorized exploitation, as huge metal reserves draw more investors. But community leaders fear displacement from traditional lands despite the community's protected status.
We
face many threats to our forests. Recently, a powerful individual came and said he had already bought our concession. We asked how that was possible when we are the ones who hold the documents. We did not know who he was, but he arrived with machinery and wanted to start work. He was trying to take our land.
In Haut-Katanga, there are 20 reserves covering 60,000 acres. 12 more are in the process of approval. The DRC's south is covered in what is known as Miombo forests, the largest dry tropical forest ecosystem in the world. But as in other parts of Africa, forests are shrinking due to agriculture, deforestation and mining.
We must protect our forests because if all the trees are cut down, the land will become a desert. Rain will become scarce, agriculture will be difficult, and we risk dying of hunger. We now know how to protect our forests and grow mushrooms because we have been trained, but there are no longer enough mushrooms in the field.
From 2001 to 2024, the Lualaba and Haut-Katanga provinces lost 1.38 million hectares of tree cover, much of it along the copper-cobalt belt, according to the Global Forest Watch.
There was a time when we harvested large quantities of good quality tomatoes. But during the dry season, mining operators wash their minerals and release the water into the Luafi River along with acids, and sometimes the fish die. When this happens, our farmland is also damaged. Today it is impossible to grow tomatoes because the harvest is rotten and full of insects.
For these communities, the difficult application of laws, decrees and orders is an obstacle. Politics also plays a role, with poor communities lacking clout. And a road built across the Katanga local forest concession to reach a mining site is a reminder that one day a mining company may try to come for their land. Beryl Oro, CGTN.
Now we turn to northern Nigeria and see how businesses have taken what was once just a local sweetener and turned it into a valuable export. Jaggery production has existed for over 200 years in the region and remains a very popular enhancement in dishes and drinks. However, its commercialization is now helping sustain families and communities alike. CGTN's Wanja Mungai with more.
Al-Qasim Zamba takes pride in his craft as a master jaggery producer. When the sugarcane harvest season comes around, his humble mini factory bursts with energy and activity as he turns raw sugarcane into sweet golden jaggery. For him, it's beyond a business. It's heritage.
We inherited this craft-making jaggery from our ancestors, and we continued in their footsteps. It is a craft of more than 200 years since our forefathers started practicing it. In the past, horses did the hard work of mashing out the juice, but we are happy that we have easier machines to use.
The simple tools of the trade are efficient enough to keep the art and the business going.
This jaggery is processed from sugarcane that we planted and left to ripen. And after the rainy season, we set up our machines, cut the sugarcane stalks. We run the stalks through the machine to separate the juice from the pulp. Then we take the juice for boiling.
The boiling process is important to evaporate excess moisture and to skim impurities to achieve a perfect concentrated syrup. A process that can go on for hours before it is taken off the fire to cool.
When it has cooled down, we remove the jaggery from the mold and arrange it in boxes. Each carton contains 100 pieces.
The traditional jaggery production represents a local sustainable alternative that has quietly endured, providing livelihoods in rural communities while meeting demand for natural sweeteners in West African markets.
I used to drink my tea with jaggery, that is mazar kwaila in Hausa, instead of using sugar because it's cheaper and healthier.
Zamba's thriving production contrasts with Nigeria's sugar import of 1.5 million metric tons annually that costs the country millions of dollars. His jaggery has now become a sweet export to neighboring countries, including Ghana, Chad, and Cameroon. Wanjamungai, CGTN.
Camera and no theatre. In Libya, the big screen has disappeared. Filmmaking has now moved into personal spaces. Director and producer Moayed Zab shoots most out making Libya visible again.
After 2011, I thought, like many others, that cinema had already been struggling before that time. Although there were theaters, film distribution was weak and mostly limited to older movies. I hoped that it will be revived again, but instead it completely died after 2011, with no screening halls left.
What many expected to be a revival became a complete fade to black.
From a commercial perspective, of course, cinema in Libya, as in most Arab countries, does not have a market, nor the revenues that a single theatrical release can generate. We have observed that with the development of new platforms, we could take a risk and invest heavily in a film project.
With no box office to rely on, Zapti is betting on streaming platforms to carry Libyan stories beyond the country's borders.
We did not grow up with this culture. We did not know it. The new generation you are talking about, the one after 2011, asks you, what is this? What is a big screen? I don't understand. How is it different from television?
With no cinemas and no shortcuts.
Ahead in the sports. We'll have the latest
on the tracks, in the arenas of Africa. Were you born to be a player? Could this moment be yours? Sports Scene.
Well, we begin with the final weekend of the Africa Cup of Nations and tonight's heavyweight clash in Casablanca for third place. Between them, Nigeria and Egypt have a combined 10 AFCON titles. However, they'll have to fight for the bronze medal in Morocco. The Super Eagles, who became many people's favorites as the tournament progressed, went down agonizingly on penalties to the hosts on Wednesday night. Head coach Eric Chell says he'd love to finish on an all-time high.
We have a last game against Egypt. I'm proud of my players, but I'm disappointed for them because the reality, we were maybe the best team maybe in this AFCON. So we have to go out.
But Mohamed Hamdi is ruled out of tonight's game with a ruptured anterior cruciate ligament. Head coach Hossam Hassan says he's trying to go as strong as possible with his squad against Nigeria. In the English Premier League, Michael Carrick says he's trying to shut out all the noise as he begins his role as Manchester United's interim manager. And it is quite a start at home to title chasers and local rivals Manchester City in Saturday's early kickoff. The former midfielder has been handed the reins for the remainder of the season after Ruben Amorim became the latest permanent manager to be let go at Old Trafford since the glory days of
opinions. A lot can be said. It is the way of the world, you know. I'm not going to pay too much attention to the most of that. I think it's not for me to do that. I think for me and the players and the staff, it's a focus on how we're going to succeed, really, and that's our job, that's our responsibility, that's where our focus and our mind should be at, is doing what we can for this club.
Elsewhere on Saturday, Sunderland welcome Crystal Palace. Liam Rossignol will make his Premier League managerial debut as his Chelsea side welcomes Brentford to Stamford Bridge. Liverpool take on Burnley while West Ham travel across London to face Tottenham Hotspur and Leeds entertain Fulham. The day's final fixture sees league leaders Arsenal visit Nottingham Forest. And his star defenders might be back in action.
Yeah, without John, without Ruben, without Josko, we are in that difficult situation for no one game. At a long, period, it's a difficult situation. But Ruben will be back soon. Josko no. John, hopefully, we'll see.
Crystal Palace's with other clubs now being linked to his services, including Manchester United. Glasner is out of contract in the summer after taking over from Roy Hodgson in early 2024. To athletics now, and the reigning Olympic champion Tamirat Tola turned out another spectacular performance to win the 2026 Doha Marathon. The Ethiopian's course record of 2 hours, 5 minutes and 39 seconds was almost a minute quicker than his gold medal winning time in Paris. The 34-year-old admitted he had been aiming for 2 hours and 4 minutes, but race conditions held him back. He was followed home by his compatriots Asefa Boki and Boki Diriba, and it was another 1-2-3 for Ethiopia in the women's action. Tigist Gezaghan won in 2 hours, 21 minutes and 14 seconds.
The race is very good. It is flat. I tried to run 2:04, but at the end, little bit windy. Because of that, I lost.
Now to the Dakar Rally, which wraps up today in Saudi Arabia, and Nasser Al Attiyah looks set for a 6th car title after the Qatari legend won Friday's penultimate 12th stage. The 55-year-old, who's also an Olympic medalist in shooting, extended his lead to 16 minutes with just today's 105-kilometer stage remaining. The stage win was his 50th in a stellar career so far. Ford's Nani Roma of Spain remains Al Attiyah's closest challenger. South Africa's Henk Lategan, who was in contention earlier this week, has fallen well off the pace to 21st overall. And we'll close with some off-season Formula One news, and Max Verstappen admitted it may take time to adjust to the new-look Red Bull. The Dutchman's run of 4 successive titles ended in last season's finale in Abu Dhabi, where his late-season surge came up just short of denying Lando Norris a maiden crown. Amid a welter of new regulations, Red Bull, in partnership with Ford, head into the 2026 season with the added challenge of producing their own power units. The 28-year-old was speaking at a launch event in Detroit.
Yeah, it's all still a bit unknown. Of course, it's a very big change, with the engine, the car. I mean, as you can see, also the dimension of the car has changed a bit. So for us drivers, I think as well.
To get in touch with us and follow us as well on all those digital media platforms. I'm Mahem Mutua. Thanks for watching.
Live from CGTN Beijing, this is Asia Today.
Hello and welcome. I'm Wang Mengmang. It's 7 p.m. here in the China